Well, that's too complicated.
Life's too complicated. No problem. All right, we are gonna go live in a moment. Perfect. All right, we're here. Welcome everyone to episode 6 of HR Leaders Live, the show where we discuss the future of work with today's most innovative and successful people leaders. My name is Chris Rainey, co-founder of HRD Leaders and host of the HR Leaders podcast. On today's show, we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion and really what are the benefits for D&I in the workplace. Today, I'm joined by James Cheng, Asif Sadiq, and John Sigmund. Guys, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
If you could all just take a second to introduce yourself, that'd be fantastic. We could start with you, James. I'm putting you on the spot.
James Chang with Cargill. I lead all the global efforts within the business resource groups in all 70 countries of Cargill.
Fantastic. John?
Yes, sure. I'm John Sigmund. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for Henry Jackson Foundation for the Advancement of Military Medicine, former head of HR at AARP.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Hi, Asif Sadiq, Head of Diversity and Inclusion for EY Financial Services.
Fantastic. We're really happy that you're all joining us. It's the magic of technology that we can connect all over the world. So it's amazing. I'm gonna jump in and start, as I said, with the question of what are the benefits of D&I in the workplace. And if it's okay with you, James, we'll start with you, if that's all right.
Absolutely. One of the big things I would definitely say is the ability to identify and give employees the opportunity to show their full potential at work. And people don't realize a lot of times is that when you can bring your full potential, you are bringing additional assets to the organization so the organization can grow. And that's usually an untapped resource that most companies, if anything, are learning to acquire or use correctly.
Mm-hmm. Feel free to jump in, guys.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think it's, the whole benefits of D&I is massive. And, as James said, the importance, you can't underestimate it because it's not only innovative. If people can bring, their whole and true self to work, you get different ideas, different solutions to problems. But I think one of the key things around all of that is, and one of the underlying questions is creating that environment to allow for that to happen. Because So often we see diverse organizations or individuals within a company, but they're all programmed to think and behave in the same manner. So the importance is massive, but you need to create that environment and space where people are comfortable enough to bring their true, authentic self to work.
Yeah. So I would concur with all of what James and Asif just said. So I think it's really not only a business imperative about bringing your authentic self to work. It really is around the inclusiveness and how that drives diversity. And there are lots and lots of very practical sorts of things that a D&I strategy can do for your organization in terms of talent acquisition, learning and development, all sorts of other things that are just the bread and butter of every HR, every organizational strategy, and leveraging D&I to influence those aspects of your organization can be really critical.
Amazing. I think before we spoke, guys, one of the things that came up was measurement of D&I, and it's something which is being spoken about a lot. And I was wondering, could you guys share how you guys are measuring the impact of D&I in your businesses?
I don't mind jumping in a little bit. Oh, go ahead, Asif, please.
Yeah, thanks, James. I was just going to say, so we measure D&I in every way possible. Being an accountancy firm, we break it down in numerous different ways. But I think the key measurements for us is not just looking at all the different characteristics, and we're actually trying to make sure that we're not just focusing on specific areas of D&I, because then it's very easy for us to focus attention on some of the bigger topic areas, whether that be gender, ethnicity. We want to make sure that we're focusing our attention on disability, sexual orientation, all the areas which might not be so visible. But the key thing to a lot of our measurements is making them real. And why I say that is, it's great to have percentages on a piece of paper and a chart which shows you increases and decreases and where there's underrepresentation. But we really need to show, or one of the things I try to do is show that's people you're talking about. That's individuals. And I think that's really, really important, because otherwise, percentage drop might not seem like a big thing, but it might be 11 people from, let's say a female background or an ethnic minority background that we might be losing. So data is great, but it's just making it real and the importance of it being highlighted.
Mm-hmm.
Another piece I would definitely say is creating a proper story to go with the numbers in a consistent basis. Because one of the biggest challenges as we're building these numbers and these metrics is consistency, because it's all up for interpretations. So reality is it's our responsibility as D&I practitioners to make sure that we craft the story in a way that is easily understandable. Two, it cannot be too much interpreted in any different way that is inappropriate or used against anyone. So it's important for us to actually understand the narrative and actually direct that information and metrics towards the right population as well.
Yeah, so I would concur with all of that. So where I am currently, we haven't really embarked on this particular aspect of things yet. But when I was at AARP, we folded a lot of the D&I metrics into our engagement survey. And so we had about 90% or plus 90% participation rate in our biannual sort of employee engagement survey. And we folded in D&I metrics into that and reported those up to the board. And then from a practical perspective, in leveraging employee resource groups to help us with recruiting, we folded those numbers in as well, and along with some other kind of, again, sort of very practical bread and butter types of things.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, sorry, just quickly, just to add one point onto that, is the importance of not over analyzing the data, not making too many data sets, because again, I've come across instances where we keep on cutting data till it paints the picture that we want to see.
I like the way you put that.
That's dangerous, right? And I think data is amazing. I mean, it gives us a good picture of where we're going, what we're doing, but I think there needs to be a set of measurements that we use. And stick to them, because it's very easy to then continuously cut it further and so on. So it's very important, but just sticking to a measurement that you think as an organization is good for you and covers everything that you need to cover, and then utilizing that going forward.
Mm. And how do you guys choose where to spend your time and what your focus should be?
Well, for me, I always go back to the employees. I actually go to my core employees, which is a lot of times my business resource group leaders and our business leaders, because we tend to stay within our spaces and partner with sometimes our HR partners and otherwise. Yes, they're important, but sometimes you do really need to go to your business leaders. You do need to go to your BRG leaders and make sure that they are giving you their feedback. And a lot of times they'll give you the answers that you're looking for.
And so I'm right along with James's strategy with that. So where I've spent the majority of my time in this space is with the volunteer leaders from our employee resource groups. And I found that to be an enormously successful and highly leverageable, quite frankly, resource for us. And so that's where I spend a lot of time. We have the budget for the employee resource groups resides within HR, and it's a very, very generous budget, very large by all standards. And so giving them the freedom and again, kind of leveraging their technical expertise. So when I was at ARP, our main office was right in the middle of the Asian community in Washington, DC. And so when we had learning and development opportunities available, we leveraged the resource groups associated with the Asian community and other communities to make sure that they were culturally competent. We leveraged them for talent acquisition kind of activities if we had to have some diversity in another area. And so leveraging those groups we found to be very, very important. And that's where we spent a lot of our time and energy.
I definitely agree with both comments from James and John. Just to add one other bit, I think one of the things which I found recently is quite important as well is spending my time with some of our clients, because I want to ensure that our staff's experiences translate across into when they're working with our clients or on our client sites. But at the same time, we learn from each other. We can share experiences, and I'd like our client experience to be more than just the core business side, but D&I to be a part of that, because that's how we'll hopefully influence the change that's required going forward.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, if you guys could get a group of D&I leaders together, what are the questions that you would want to ask?
Wow, that's that's
I wasn't planned. That wasn't planned, by the way. I just thought, let me throw that in there just to see what's on your guys' mind. You know, if I can say to you, you know, I'm gonna be interviewing all of these HR D&I leaders over the next few months. You know, what is it you guys would be interested in knowing, and what's the questions that come to mind?
I think it's a lot of it is, you know, I mean, I think we do a lot of, I think D&I space is quite good anyway. I mean, a lot of leaders, we share information. We're not sort of protective of what we do. So we share that. But for me, I think the key question would be, how can we utilize each other more and the power of us coming together to influence bigger change? So you know, a lot of us lead our organizations and influence change within them. But I think collectively, you know, if we came together, and we're able to put pressure on all our organizations in the right way, it's just more of a powerful voice. So for me, I think that would be the question. How do we take all the expertise, and every one of us, I think, has, you know, areas that we have more knowledge on, or are experts on, or experiences that, you know, can help shape and assist other organizations. So it's collectively bringing that power together would be my thing, or my question.
Yeah. So I like that. I think for me, particularly, what I'd like to find out a little bit more about is, how is it that you're taking all of the good work that you're doing internally, and how is that translating to your customers? How are you utilizing that for multicultural marketing? Sort of, how are you making sure that the inside of your organization is matching your market forces on the outside, and what does that mean? And I guess the other thing that's of particular interest to me is sort of outside of the D&I space, and maybe it's just my experience here on the East Coast of America, is why does it seem so difficult for people to talk about these topics? Sort of outside of the HR and the D&I space, there seems to be a lot of reticence to have conversations. And perhaps it's because people feel like they'll say the wrong thing. I mean, I'm just not sure what it is, but I'd like to understand a little bit more about other people's perspectives on that.
One of my biggest questions is, how does it look globally when it comes to the work? It's very different in every region, in every country in the world. And what is the biggest challenges that some of our D&I practitioners sees in the different areas around the globe?
Can anyone help each other on those questions?
I mean, I think just on John's question, you know, I think it's interesting, because one of the things I'm finding recently is, and even globally, you know, when you see the world around us, is you know, where the majority start feeling like the minority, or that they're missing out because of this D&I thing, where people see D&I as just for people who look different, or, you know, they just necessarily just look at the protected characteristics. And I think it's one of the challenges that we have to really look at addressing, because, you know, the importance of getting the majority on board with the agenda, you know, I can't even emphasize how important that is. But it's the understanding that each person is an individual. And quite interested to give a very, very quick example. You know, I was at a meeting the other day, and it was with a number of our sort of partners. And one partner was like, so I was asking people to share their personal, you know, diversity story, or, you know, experiences. And he was like, I haven't got any. And I'm like, of course you've got something. You must have something, you know. And he's like, well, it's not as great as yours. I'm like, it's not about being great. It's not
great as yours. What a response.
Yeah, but you know, it was that sense that, you know, because mine are more visible, it might be great. And it was, and when he started speaking, he had some great examples. You know, like his family. You know, he lived outside of London, and I mean, there was so many things, and he felt confident going away afterwards. He was, oh yeah, I now see it. So I think it's about ensuring that everyone sees it as diversity and inclusion covers everyone. You know, everyone's part of it. Everyone has something that they can bring to the table. But we just need to, I think, you know, start that conversation, because otherwise it's very easy for people to feel, you know, cut off or not part of diversity, because they see it as being for a specific group or group of individuals.
Yeah, I certainly see that that's the case. Exactly what John said to that point. A lot of people tread on eggshells when it comes to the topic. And if anything, they just avoid it, because, as you said, they don't want to say the wrong things. They don't want to come across, they just don't want to put themselves in the position to say something that they may regret or reflect on them. And that actually is the opposite of what we want to do. it's a complete reverse effect that we're trying to have in the space as well, which is very, even me, for having my wife's black, and in the office, certain comments will be made and someone will look over at me and then they'll look at me to see if I'm offended or not, and then all of a sudden it's like you can't say anything around Chris around that in case he happens to be offended. I'm like, no, let's just have a conversation about it. It's not a problem. We can do that as well. So,
but it's interesting, Chris, even with terminology, just what you've mentioned, there is no right or wrong. I was at an event the other day and they were like, is there a glossary of terms that you can use when you're referring to people of ethnic minority background?
Yeah, but so people might not like the fact I just said black, for example.
No, but you see, I mean,
but where I'm from, that's normal, as you know, from being in London.
Exactly, but someone might not like someone might not like being called people of color. Someone might not like ethnic minority. But I think the key thing is, if we spend too long worrying about what we're going to call each other, we're not addressing the topics or the issues that we need to be addressing. So, I mean, terminology will never get right, but I think if we ask the questions in the right way, then at least we're not struggling on them. Because no two people, I mean, you can find two South Asian people like me, and we'll have different views on what you want to call us and what you don't want to call us. So,
yeah.
but if we get stuck on that, and especially people who are not from those groups, it's such a worry for them. How do I describe someone? Or can I say that? Can I not? But let's get over that and start addressing the challenges.
Sometimes you don't see it though, because I grew up in my school. There was 2 white kids in the class. Everyone else was black, and that was just East London. Where did you grow up? As if you don't mind asking.
West London.
West London. So probably the same, right? Similar.
Yeah,
and then when I went to college, again there was like 4 white kids in the class. Everyone else was either black or Asian. So when I came into the corporate world, I was shocked because I've always been in such a diverse upbringing and background. I was like, what is going on? why is everyone so on edge and nervous about communicating, saying the right things, and especially the leaders were the worst culprits, obviously, of that. And I was like, I didn't get it, but I suppose that's because I grew up in such a diverse culture that it was just so comfortable for me. If anything, and it sounds really strange, the first time I was in a corporate meeting and it was just all white people in the room, that was strange to me. That was an unusual experience to me because I'd always been around people of color of all different cultures. I was like, whoa, why is it just, I know it sounds really horrible for me to say, but why is it just all old white people in the room with me right now? And you know what, you may find that funny, but do you know the amount of emails that I get about our events? And they will say to me, Chris, I'm not attending your event because your speakers are just all middle-aged white men, so I'm not coming to your event. And I was like, wow. And I get those more often than you would think. And even today, and for everyone listening, I definitely didn't want to have just 4 men on the show today. So, and I was very conscious that when we started this call, that we're having a call about D&I, and I have no women leaders and females on the show. So I just want to let you guys know that wasn't intentional for the show today, because I'm sure someone's going to drop me a comment on LinkedIn telling me after this. One of the questions I got when I said I was going to have D&I as the topic for this week is, and I asked you this last time, James, and it may be simple for you, but for many others it's not, is that where do we start? Most companies don't have someone leading D&I in their organization. So could you provide some advice of if you were building a function or within your business, where do they start? I was going to jump in.
I thought you were aiming the question at James.
Oh, no, I wasn't. Sorry, I wasn't. It's open for everyone. I'm just wondering what would be your advice really to where you start in your organization?
I guess for me it's about embedding it into processes that might exist if you're starting at that stage. There's a lot of HR processes, organizational processes, strategies that are already in place. And sometimes at that early stage where you're starting off, to bring about this great change all of a sudden can be difficult for organizations maybe to take in that way. But if there's existing processes that you can start looking at from a D&I lens, and actually even for organizations like ourselves who'd like to believe that we've embedded D&I quite well, one of the key things for us is making D&I business as usual. It should be part of all our processes. So if you can start on that, it's even greater, I guess, the impact of that.
I like that. I mean, my predisposition is around sort of the grassroots level. So if you have absolutely nothing in place today, there's something that's going on in your organization. And so I would strongly, strongly encourage any organization that finds themselves in that particular predicament to start by standing up a few employee resource groups. Call them whatever you want to call them. But these sort of volunteer-led efforts that come up from the employee population, and then kind of the care and feeding of them from the corporate level. In my experience has been that you can leverage that works much better. So when I was at AARP, we had 25% of our entire employee population belonged to at least one affinity group, and we only had 7. And I've heard stories of other organizations where they'll give you $1,200 a year if you want to start an affinity group. And you could have an affinity group for hiking or coffee drinkers or, Asians working in tech, whatever you want, as long as it's not unethical or immoral or against company policy, they'll give you the money and you're off and running. And so that tends to be a really great resource. And to Asif's point, you can kind of, again, sort of embed that into a lot of your HR processes and of course your business processes as well. But that's my bent on it.
I would have to agree with both these gentlemen. One part I would add is, of course, making sure you're starting from the very core of where it actually came from, which many times is an imperative somewhere led either by leadership of some sort, because they're asking the question, and understanding why they're asking that question is a great start. Because if they're just saying it just to say it, then there's no meaning to back it in the future. So understanding where their journey is, whoever that started the conversation, and what is the overall reason, and if it's you who's trying to drive it because there is a need, can you verbalize it? Can you put structure around it? Can you put it into a story that is tangible, if that best describes?
Definitely, and I think, and as you both all just said, it doesn't take a huge amount of money to make this happen, right? It's not a huge investment on the business's behalf. I think a lot of people think that that's the case, and what I've learned from you guys speaking with you is certainly not. Could you share some successes that you guys have had through the work that you guys are doing that's made an impact, either financially on the business or culturally within the organizations?
I can jump in. One of the things, and this is prior to Cargill and going over to Cargill now with it, is that unique network that you build within the organization that gives the people the opportunity to reach leaders and vice versa. That was one of those successes that was initially not planned, which it was a great thing. We built a network that employees can reach over and be more cross-functional and be able to communicate directly with and influence the organization outside of their day job. And that was one of those successes that we were able to notice right away because things were moving faster. Things were taking effect when there was missions that was set into place.
So I'll share a quick little story. I'm not going to mention the organization, but I was with an organization and we had an employee who was in the process of transitioning. And so this employee came to HR looking for some assistance because they were going to continue to be in the workplace, et cetera. And so we went out, we leveraged some of the experiences from our affinity group, the LGBTQ affinity group. We went out in the community, got someone who's a renowned expert. We actually held a town hall meeting. We had a panel of people, some from inside the organization, some from outside the organization, to talk very frankly about what these issues are, what they mean, the use of pronouns, all of that sort of stuff. And but by the time we were done, the room was packed. By the time we were done, there really wasn't a dry eye in the house. And that was really kind of a pivotal moment for the organization in terms of kind of turning the corner on D&I, particularly with the transgender, gay, lesbian community for that organization. And it was just, to this day, it was an extraordinarily moving experience for myself and for all of the participants and everyone in the room. And the transition for this individual, I can't say that it went seamlessly because I didn't go through it and I wasn't involved with their activities on a day-to-day basis. But I can almost guarantee you that it would have been less successful had we not gone through that effort and had that person not had the courage to come forward and have a conversation with us about it.
Yeah, so just to add on that, I think probably give an example from, so before, I should have mentioned this earlier on, but before I joined EY, I spent 13 years in the police service as head of diversity and as a police officer for 13 years. So some great challenges, some great achievements. But I think one of the big things for me would probably be something which I sort of introduced there, and we're still doing in EY as well, which is sponsorship of people from an ethnic minority background, and are from a female background as well. I think why I say that's a great achievement, because I think there's a lot of mentoring schemes, counselling opportunities, and they're great. I mean, there's a place for them. But what people from the underrepresented groups really need is sponsorship, someone to vouch for them, someone to make sure they get on the right jobs, someone to make sure they get the right opportunities to succeed within the organization. And the successes I've seen through that over the years, both in policing and in the private sector in EY, is amazing. You can just see people growing because people have the ambition and the desire to grow, but don't necessarily have the networks or the opportunities, or people vouching for them when they're not in the room. And if we can create that artificially, then I'm all for it, because it naturally, as many of my colleagues on this call are aware, that naturally sponsorship comes to a lot of people naturally, but to certain underrepresented groups it's a bit more difficult. So that's the big win for me, sponsorship.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and I think with everything you guys are doing as well, I was just wondering, how do you? I think we spoke about this last time, James, about how to make sure that we're working with different leaders in the business, and why D&I is different from leader to leader and what it means to them. I'm just wondering how you guys tackle that. You mentioned a bit earlier as well, Asif, when you had that meeting where one of the leaders was struggling to share their own D&I story or journey, and what it means to them. I was just wondering how you guys overcome that, and what approach you take to make that happen, because this is very, very important. If they're not bought into the process and they understand their own D&I journey and their own experience, it's very difficult for them to actually then help you guys as well. So I'm just wondering how you overcome that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the key things is, when we say leaders, it should be all our leaders. That's one of the big things for me. And it's easy to as a D&I practitioner to go to people who are maybe more sort of easier to convince, if that makes sense.
No, I'm with you. I think we all understand what you mean by that.
Yeah,
Yes.
but I'm now on a journey myself where I think it's important to educate as I mentioned earlier, the vast majority, and I think some of the more as I said initially, that a lot of people have that, there's some element there, but it's about capturing that element that they bring to the table and making them comfortable. A lot of people, it's not that they dismiss D&I, it's just that fear sometimes, or the lack of understanding, which prevents them from wanting to engage. But when you start breaking down, into what it really means practically, I think there's always something, and there's always something which someone would want to buy into. That might be it's the right thing to do. It might be that it makes financial sense. Or it might be that if we don't do it, we're going to fail. So there's something. There's always a nudge that you can use that I found that works. But it is a journey, and I think every leader within an organization should be on that journey.
I would have to agree, every bit of it. And also the fact you also want to help the person identify their own diversity. That's one of the key, because if they don't understand what it means to them, they're never going to understand anyone else's. From there, once they understand that, then you talk about inclusivity, because once you merge those two together, that's when it becomes effective. So I would definitely say help them identify their diversity, why it's important to them, and then how you can tie it into the overall inclusivity in general.
Yeah. How do you choose? I think we said this earlier, but where to focus your attention? Are you guys part of the board meetings, strategy meetings? How much involvement do you have in those areas, and then how does that affect the work that you guys do?
So for Cargill, our inclusion and diversity, so we actually flipped it.
Flipped it around. Okay.
Yes, we flipped it around because we knew inclusivity was vital for diversity to even succeed and flourish. So we did flip it. We are actually a COE, so a Center of Excellence or expertise, whichever different organization uses. We help create the strategy to help guide the organization. So a little bit different than some organizations. We're not just an HRBP in that sense, or a just a subgroup. We're actually in support of overall strategy as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So what does your relationship with HR look like then? How does that work?
We're in HR as one of the actual specific 12 pillars
Okay.
within Cargill. So just like there's comp and benefits, there is talent acquisition or talent performance. Our COE is a dedicated piece within HR that supports that reports up to our chief human resources.
Is that similar for you, SF? What does the structure look like within your own organization?
So for us, our D&I sits within our leadership team. So it's part of our UK-wide leadership team, and so it's directly reporting into our UK chairman. So it's actually quite a direct link straight there. Of course, we link into all parts of our business, and we work very, very closely with HR and our central business services. But then it's broken down into service lines as well. So we've got different service lines of different areas of our business. But the top structure comes down from the leadership team, which is where everything sits. Yeah.
The reason I asked that is I noticed that in every conversation I have, it works completely differently in different organizations. And I was wondering why is that was it just me getting unlucky, or is that pretty normal that sometimes it's just directly underneath HR and part of one of those core pillars, as James says, sometimes it's directly reporting into the CEO, the chairman of the organization. Is there a way that works? Is it just really depending on the business, on how it's structured? There's no common way that it's structured, or is it just really depending on how the business operates and how it works? Just wondering if there's a particular structure that people should be focusing on.
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest, Chris. I think what James said is very, very right, and what we do is right in itself, because there's accountability then to the leadership team. But some of the processes and process change requires our talent teams, HR teams, our marketing teams, and so on to be part of. So I think it's a bit of both, and every single sort of reporting structure or engagement plays a part in that overall strategy. But having buy-in from the top, I think, is crucial to making things happen, because then the challenges that you might face, or when you're trying to embed some of the D&I processes, is a lot easier because it's come straight from the top, and that there's that understanding already amongst the leadership team. So I think that's the advantage of that. But I think the day-to-day is a lot more with other central business services.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to ask you the question earlier of what was the biggest challenge? Do you think getting the buy-in is the biggest challenge? Because that's the common thing that I hear over and over and over again. On your both of your journeys, more specifically for James and Asif, as you guys have built the functions, even for yourself, John. What was the biggest challenges that you faced when in terms of getting all of these groups off the ground, and is it getting the buy-in, or is there other things that we need to look out for along the way?
I would say the number one thing for me was helping leaders and people understand there's no silver bullet. I keep saying that quite often. They expect that we can solve this once and we're done. And that's the one thing I have to set the foundation for anyone that I talk to.
I think that's right. Look, it's not about what box on what piece of paper reports to another box. Somebody mentioned a little earlier about embedding things and kind of making it part of the fabric of the organization. I think clearly that's an admirable end goal, and I think that's where we should be. I think from a very practical perspective, I mentioned a little earlier kind of the grassroots piece of things, but having the leadership buy-in up top. So one of the things that we did was we finagled an audience with our volunteer resource group leadership with the CEO, sort of an unfiltered meeting with just the CEO and the leadership of these groups, without HR present, without a chief of staff present, without any of these, so that they could have a frank conversation about what's going on in the organization. And that didn't cost a nickel in hard money. Opportunity cost is there, but and we found that to be very, very effective. And that's a quarterly meeting that happens. There's there's an opportunity to share insights. So we found that to be really, really effective. But again, sort of this idea that, and again, I think it's circumstantial, it just depends on the organization, but not focusing on sort of the box, to James's point, and kind of think, well, we've got this function here, it reports there, we're done. That really is just not even the first step.
Yeah, I really like the idea you just said as well, and I think it's important not to have any other HR in the room or to have everyone else in the room. It just be that one-on-one, because otherwise, no, you don't, because then it's just kind of feels like a bit forced and like, rehearsed, and then I can guarantee you no one's really going to be speaking their mind openly and genuinely what they're thinking with all of, with HR in the room. HR seems to be like the black cloud. Oh, we can't say that, HR's here. It always happens. They're the nicest people in the world, aren't they, John?
Right. Of course. Well, I mean, and the CEO took a very, a great approach, really, and it took kind of a coaching approach, really. So the leadership of this group, I mean, they were the ones who brought the agenda. This was not the CEO's agenda. This is their agenda. They bring it to the CEO and they have a conversation. So that was really the only kind of rule that existed, other than the date and time of the meeting, was you bring the agenda. That's kind of the only obligation.
Mm-hmm. Great. Oh, last question for you guys. Where do you see the future of D&I going? Like, what for you? What does the future hold for D&I? And it's a big question, but I'm just wondering what you guys think about that. I'm gonna start with you, James.
For me, I would definitely say the future is how the actual businesses start seeing and utilizing it effectively. I know that they're trying to get into it. They're trying to understand how it's valuable to them, how they can use it as a resource. That's where I think the future needs to lie in the future, to make sure that D&I is truly effective, is that they see it in a way that it is a value proposition that's long-term for the businesses.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I sort of see the future. I'm very, very hopeful. So I'm hopeful that probably long after I've left this planet, that organizations will be viewing D&I as, again, part of the fabric of their organization, just like accounting. Right. I mean, not to make too much of a false correlation. And I think that the reason why I'm hopeful about this is that more and more organizations are realizing that, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, is that this has to do with money, profitability, driving results, market share, all of those sorts of things that are important. And because of that, boards are paying attention. And because boards are paying attention, then organizations will have to pay attention. So I'm really very, very hopeful that we're going to get to a place where D&I is part of the fabric of every organization and is how we do business.
Yeah, I'd definitely agree with both comments. And if I was to add anything, I guess it would be really I think the future would be all about individuality, intersectionality. I think the world is changing so much that we all possess so many different elements of D&I. But the individuality is a big piece. And I think it's one of the areas I feel that if we don't address, it will be quite problematic, because, the grouping of individuals or, groups together and assuming their needs are similar can be dangerous. And therefore, so I really do see the future as, the individuality and treating people's intersectionality as an important part. And if I can just add just a challenge for the future, I guess, is some of the emerging, areas of D&I which are very different, and I'll just touch on one or two, which is, things like, family life. That's an emerging, I say emerging area. And the reason I say that is even more so from a male perspective, the importance of fathers wanting to play a part in the family life, not being just the breadwinners anymore, and shared responsibility around childcare and so on. These are emerging areas. Faith keeps on coming up. It's quite a dominant part, with recent sort of changes across Europe and internationally, and some of the events, unfortunately, it's becoming a topical issue. And these are things which are going to be important in the D&I space going forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate sharing that. One question I wanted to ask you as well is, how can I help you guys? Because it may seem like a strange question, but I have a huge network of HR leaders, D&I leaders that I speak with every day. That's part of my job. Is I have hundreds of phone calls with your peers every day. And I was wondering, you mentioned about bringing more of you guys together. would it be of an interest for us to bring together a group of leaders like yourselves on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis to have these discussions? Would that be something of value to you? Because that's something I'm looking at working on building, and it doesn't take a lot of effort for me to put that together. And I'm just wondering if that would be of value to you guys. Are you part of any networks at the moment, just out of interest, that anyone can get involved with this listening, or is it really just your local organizations that you're working with, just out of interest? Are there any websites, resources that we could be looking at and sharing with the members?
I think, Chris, I mean, I think it's great. And I think, yes, definitely, it'd be great to, I mean, I've learned things from this call today. You always learn something or the other, and I think it's important for us to come together and share ideas. And yes, there are platforms that exist, but, there's always space for another one. As long as we're sharing honest, feedback, and it's a safe environment, I think that's the biggest thing.
100%.
Comfortable, because no one wants their organization to be, for that, we're speaking as D&I practitioners. We're not, necessarily representing our organization. And I think that's the important thing. But yes, definitely, I think there is that, I'm always up for learning. You learn every day and you never know who you're going to learn what from. So, 100% for it.
Mm-hmm. And are you part of any networks in London, just out of curiosity?
I am, yeah.
I'll have to take that offline then. About it. But is it mainly local businesses that you're meeting with, or is it really broader than that?
So there's, to be honest, there's networks which are pan organizations as well, covering public, private sector, different organizations. Then I'm part of certain financial service networks, which are great. And I mean, everything contributes something, right? But yeah. I mean, there's some UK-wide, there's some European networks, there's some international networks as well. But yeah, I mean, I think there's the other thing with the networks, and I guess, like we had some questions here which prompted certain responses, which helped, I guess, and it opened up certain discussions. I think that's really, really important, because there's a lot of network events, some of the discussions that we attend, if there's no agenda, then we're not achieving much. So it'd be nice to have certain questions or some homework that we can bring.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, and that's why I'm asking. I'm always learning. I've spent my whole life speaking with HR practitioners, so I can ask questions around talent, OD, change, leadership. Those are the areas that I know the most. And D&I is something that I'm really trying to help contribute. Obviously, it's something close to my heart. Based on me growing up, obviously my wife and my family, it's a very important topic for me too. And I just really want to make sure we can help in any way we can, as much as possible. And I be honest, when I looked out to find any networks, I couldn't find much. Unless I don't know about them and they're all private and no one wants to let me in. So I don't know. What do you think, James?
I think we'll connect you offline for sure.
Oh, okay. There's too many things.
There's a lot of organizations out there. I would definitely say be strategic about it, though. You do not want to spread yourself too thin with these organizations, and understand that you have your space that you need to work in, and you need to partner with others and get them exposed into the space. So this activity of bringing us together completely makes sense, and I completely am for it. In the same time, I also say let them do what they do well as leaders in the space. Is we know how to talk to each other, and you giving us an avenue to do so is the first key to this.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just get you all together and say go.
Pretty much.
And you know what, James? What would be really, really just on your point, what we could add to that is bringing in some of the topical mainstream business. I say mainstream business issues. I of course believe D&I is a mainstream business issue, but so for just to give you some very quick ideas, things like innovation. Innovation is a massive thing for us right now. Technology.
Yes.
But all these things have a massive D&I element to it. But it'd be great to get some of the people who are having those conversations around technology and innovation speaking to us. So we can get the D&I bits in as well. So we can share learning, so we have a lot to learn from each other and we can always share ideas. But it'd be nice with the topical discussions in areas of, where businesses are focusing their attention, if we can bring them on board as well.
Yeah. Well, on that point, James has kindly enough joined our innovation. We have a HR innovation series where we meet once a month, and we bring together between 50 and 70 chief HR officers. And one of the things they asked me is, Chris, we need to put D&I on the agenda. And James has kindly enough agreed to join us and deliver a workshop for those guys. And the feedback I've had so far, they're really excited about it, right?
Excellent.
And it's going to be great for James because he's going to get a completely different perspective from than he would normally get, and that's a really good value for him as well, and also for the leaders because it's an area that they know they need to spend more time on. But even just the CHROs and the leaders I'm working with, they've still got a lot of work to do, and they don't really know how to leverage D&I yet in their business as well. Are you there, Matt, by the way? Matt just joined last minute. Matt Burns has disappeared. He's just showing up his name just to make sure he made an appearance. But I think that's all for today, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And before we leave, one parting piece of guidance for other HR, D&I practitioners out there, what would that be?
So I think for me, just to piggyback on a couple of other things that have been said is to start talking and start having conversations with people outside of our space. So just as an analogy, within HR, we talk a lot about the future of work and the future of HR, et cetera, but typically we're only talking to ourselves. It won't matter that much if we keep talking to ourselves. We've got to expand out the message. I think somebody mentioned that a little bit earlier. So that would be the one thing I would leave with.
I would say help people find their courage and their diversity. Help them identify and understand it for themselves and bring them into the conversation.
I'd say just to add to that is, not to give up. In the D&I space, you face challenges and a lot of, barriers and frustrations which come up. And the important thing is to continue at it. It's a small chipping away that eventually, you can see the light coming through. So it's, for anyone out there who might be not in such a big organization or in an organization which might not be so ahead on D&I, it's still the small things that you never know how much of a difference one small thing that you do around D&I will have, or how much of an impact it will have in the long run. So it's never giving up, I guess.
Fantastic. It's a journey, right? Not a destination.
Exactly.
That's the thing that I took away from this conversation is that there is no end. It's just a continue. It's like building a culture in a business. It's not a project, a week, a month, a year. It's just an ongoing thing as well. So I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time out to join us. Well, that's all for today, guys. As always, we never made it as half an hour. So I think we're gonna have to change the timing from half an hour to an hour because we never managed to make it. So I'm sorry for keeping you guys longer than I should have. Guys, we'll be posting the video on LinkedIn shortly. So if you want to check it out there or on YouTube. I'll be reaching out to you all shortly with an invitation to the group. So I really appreciate that. Apart from that, thanks for everyone for listening, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Guys, thanks so